our government is different than other governments. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, was about us, the people, not about the government. So what our founding fathers did was they created a government to answer to us, not the other way around. Our protections, our Constitution, is designed to protect us from the government, not to be protected by the government. Now, there are aspects that places responsibility on the government to protect us from, we'll just say, on the border. But the overall theme of our government is that they work for us, they serve us, not the other way around. So when I say we're supposed to be protected from the government, not by the government, it sparks a thought in my mind to where our government today seems to think that they're here to protect us from ourselves and that we are to obey them. I don't know when this switch happened, but it's very recent. During the jab, the government was telling us things that they felt would help us and protect us from ourselves. That's not their role. We had an incident. The number one trending story was Tucker Carlson. Why was it the number one trending story? Because Tucker Carlson found another instance in where the government felt that they didn't need to give us information and that they were doing a better service to us by not giving us all the information we needed to protect us. We needed them to protect us. What am I talking about? I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about, but I'm just taking a different approach to it because I don't think people are looking at it the right way. The government was supposed to certify an election on January 6th, 2021. There was a huge rally for President Donald Trump at the time, and a riot broke out at the Capitol. I will always consider it a riot. They labeled it an insurrection. An insurrection would require some kind of conspiracy to overthrow the government. That is not what happened on January 6th. But all we heard nonstop for the last 2 years is how that was equivalent to Pearl Harbor. That was equivalent to 9/11, and that it was an attack on our democracy.
The president has been very clear. January 6th was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War, and we should be focused on making sure that never happens again.
How can you have an insurrection and nobody dies? So what did our government do? Our government said, okay, well, we need to fill some criteria here. We need conspiracy, we need death, and we need to label this an armed insurrection. And we heard it over and over and over and over again. Armed insurrection, armed insurrection, insurrection. They tried to overthrow the government. Threat to democracy, threat to democracy. They killed 5 police officers. This is what they did. To protect us, they didn't want us to see the footage. They didn't want us to see footage of somebody laying down pipe bombs in D.C. the day before the riot happened. So the question, I mean, so many questions come to mind, but if this happened, why can't we see the footage? Oh, well, for security purposes, we don't want to disclose where all the cameras are. We don't want to show methods and procedures that as to how the Capitol is secured, blah, 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 blah. Okay, there's ways to blur things out. We've seen it done. We've seen this done, I mean, since the beginning of camera footage, we've seen people able to represent something accurately with just blurring something out. You don't have to edit stuff out. You don't have to use all the angles, especially if there are several angles. There was over 40,000 hours of footage of one event on January 6th. We saw on a loop, nonstop, some very troubling things, some very violent things, some criminal acts. No one said there wasn't violence. No one said there wasn't criminals acting like fools. No one said there wasn't people that were doing very dangerous things at the Capitol on January 6th. What we've said from day one is, who are the people? What are you going to do about it? Where was the protection? And how did it happen in the first place? How could they have not been ready when the FBI claimed? See, the FBI loves to make these claims. The FBI claimed that they knew all along this was going to happen. So what did they do? They took a guy named Jake Chansley, and they labeled him the QAnon shaman. Why? Because he had this weird Viking outfit on. He's walking through the Capitol on that day. He had a megaphone. And it's just really interesting that they chose him, because from day one, I was like, that guy's not, he's not your typical MAGA person. He's off. Something's wrong with him. And it turns out he's a former naval veteran, and he does have some mental stuff going on now. But they're really not helping, because they locked him up for 4 years for being an insurrectionist and for being the face of that tragedy of the January 6th insurrection. 4 years. There are people, I'm going to put this up. There's a guy who R-worded children under 10. I think 8 was the oldest the kid was. He got 180 days. So this goes to show you how they view this insurrection. They need it to be what they claimed it to be. They need it to be an armed insurrection with the threat of ending our democracy. They need you to believe everything is fine, there's nothing to see here. And if you see something here, you're a conspiracy theorist. So with that shaman, he had to get the maximum sentence that they could give him for what he did. The problem is they didn't release any footage of anything that he did. They didn't release any footage of anything, really. We saw a loop. Tons and tons and tons of questions were brought up after that happened, and none of them were being answered. So we got this big show from a group of partisan hacks and people who just hated Donald Trump. And they created a January 6th committee, and they were going to expose the truth. But all they did was run a narrative of how Donald Trump caused an attempted overthrow of the United States government. They couldn't prove anything. There were no weapons. He literally said peacefully protest. But they still made it work. How did they make it work? They selectively showed footage of things that happened, and then they screwed around with the context. Tucker Carlson proved, or should I say disproved, so many of the narratives that we heard for so many years. The Josh Hawley thing, oh, he was running like a coward, ha 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 ha.
To prove that Josh Hawley was a coward, the committee released video of him loping out of the building on the afternoon of January 6th with a police escort. The tape became a staple on social media. Democrats laughed with derision.
Later that day, Senator Hawley fled after those protesters he helped to rile up stormed the Capitol. See for yourself.
But in fact, the surveillance footage we reviewed shows that famous clip was a sham, edited deceptively by the January 6th committee. The clip was propaganda, not evidence. The actual videotape shows that Hawley was one of many lawmakers being ushered out of the building by Capitol Hill police officers. And in fact, Hawley was at the back of the pack. The coward tape was a lie, one of many from the January 6th committee.
Tucker Carlson proved that to be 100% false. The QAnon shaman was some kind of leader in that movement. False. He proved it to be 100% false.
Virtually every moment of his time inside the Capitol was caught on tape. The tapes show that Capitol Police never stopped Jacob Chansley. They helped him. They acted as his tour guides. Here's video of Chansley in the Senate chamber. Capitol Police officers take him to multiple entrances and even try to open locked doors for him. We counted at least 9 officers who were within touching distance of unarmed Jacob Chansley. Not one of them even tried to slow him down. Chansley understood that Capitol Police were his allies. Video shows him giving thanks for them in a prayer on the floor of the Senate. Watch.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving the inspiration needed to these police officers to allow us in this building.
Contrast the reality of what Jacob Chansley did in the Capitol building on January 6th, the indisputable facts recorded on video, some of which has never before been seen, with the depiction of Jacob Chansley that you've seen in the media for more than 2 years.
That committee of United States representatives lied. They left that whole part out. Not only did they leave it out, they said it didn't happen that way. They called him violent. They locked him up for 4 years. What's another narrative that they ran with that Tucker Carlson proved to be 100% false? That the people who went in were violent, they were running the halls, they were calling for I think they said Pelosi's death, where's Nancy, all this other stuff, that they were violent and they were trying to do something to these people. They were under a threat. Well, there's a couple reasons why that was false. And it doesn't mean there weren't people doing that. But overall, it was very, very clear. People were staying in queues and taking selfies and going on tours through the Capitol building. It's on video. It's all on video. But they didn't show us that. Why? It's to protect you. They literally have it all on video and they would not show us the video. So when Speaker McCarthy gives the info to Tucker and says, here, sort through it, do with it what you want. This is what we need. When United States citizens ask for transparency from government, they are asking for access to information. They don't want to hear, oh, that's classified. Oh, that's classified. Oh, I can't speak about that. Oh, that's under investigation. Can't speak on that. Oh, that's classified. Because the more you do that, the more you leave room for conspiracies. And the more there are conspiracies, the less trust there is in government. And the less trust in government means you're losing the American citizen. Don't forget, you work for me. When an employer doesn't trust its employees, they get rid of the employees. So they were terrified that Tucker Carlson was given access to information. We should all want the information. What they say, he was going to spin it. He's going to spin it and he's going to make it look like something it isn't. Okay, is that not what the January 6th committee did? Did they not selectively choose footage to make it look violent? Why didn't they just release the information, period? Why not blur out all the exits and blur out any location indicators and just show the footage of the actual people? They didn't want that information out. So what did they do? They attacked Tucker Carlson. Not what he said, not what he showed. They attacked him. He proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that Officer Sicknick, the guy that they claimed was killed,
police officers died.
Donald Trump supporters who, of course, rioted and killed police officers.
January 6th, they said, was a deadly insurrection.
There was a deadly insurrection that the right wing is trying to cover up.
He incited a deadly insurrection.
Incited a deadly insurrection.
The violent, deadly insurrection on the Capitol 9 months ago, it was about white supremacy, in my view.
A deadly insurrection. Everything about that phrase is a lie. They repeated that claim for years. They are still repeating it. At first, they told the country that Officer Sicknick was murdered with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
That story came from the New York Times, which is effectively the assignment editor for most of the rest of American media.
The New York Times has quietly retracted its story about the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick.
The damage had been done. Brian Sicknick, himself a Trump voter, had been transformed without his consent into a political martyr of the left. His memory was shamelessly exploited by the incoming Biden administration. In February of 2021, Sicknick's body lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda, where a parade of unscrupulous politicians made use of it. Here's Joe Biden.
Breaking down the doors, trying to overturn an outcome of election, and killing several police officers in the meantime.
But Brian Sicknick should not be reduced to a prop for the political ambitions of the Democratic Party. He was a human being. The facts of his life matter, including how he died. To this day, media accounts describe Sicknick as someone who was, quote, slain on January 6th. The video we reviewed proves that is a lie. Here is surveillance footage of Sicknick walking in the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by the mob outside. By all appearances, Sicknick is healthy and vigorous. He's wearing a helmet, so it's hard to imagine he was killed by a head injury. Whatever happened to Brian Sicknick was very obviously not the result of violence he suffered at the entrance to the Capitol. This tape overturns the single most powerful and politically useful lie the Democrats have told us about January 6th. The January 6th committee knew perfectly well that Brian Sicknick was walking normally through the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by Trump supporters. And they know that because they saw this tape. We can be sure because the footage contains an electronic bookmark that is still archived in the Capitol's computer system. That means that investigators working for the Democratic Party reviewed this tape. They saw it, but they refused to release the tape to the public. Why? Because this tape would shatter the fraud they were perpetrating on the country. Because hiding the truth served their political interest. They lied about the police officer they claimed to revere. If they were willing to do that, then their dishonesty knew no limits.
They just made up a narrative. Does that bother you? It really bothers me. It's one thing to know all this stuff, because I knew all this stuff because I actually sifted through all the online information about January 6th. In real time, I was looking into it like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. Wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And I knew that that officer did not die as a result of anything related to January 6th. I knew he died of natural causes. Why? Because the coroner said he died of natural causes. They said, well, we accept the coroner's findings that he died of natural causes, but he still died as a result of January 6th somehow. Tucker Carlson proved that to be 100% false. The next day, Chuck Schumer went and demanded that Tucker Carlson be taken off the air, that Fox News not allow him to air any more footage, that it was a threat to democracy to let the people know, we the people know, what actually happened that day. Only the January 6th committee can leak video of that. Why? Since when do we call for censorship? Since when would a legislator get on the floor on our time at work and demand censorship? How is that endangering anybody? Well, Tucker came on and did what he said he was going to do. He brought out a lieutenant of the Capitol Police at the time who was in charge of securing the certification of the election of 2020. This guy was not only there, he was in charge. They characterized him in a way so that they didn't have to even interview the guy. They didn't have to show the people who he was, why he had a MAGA hat on.
So tell us why you put the hat on and how that was related to your suspension.
That's what got me national attention, was the wearing of the MAGA hat. They were officers. We had a distress call that they were approximately 10 or 11 officers, I can't remember the exact number, were trapped at the top of the rotunda steps. So I elicited the help of some CDU officers to help me go up the steps. And I kept yelling that all the way up the steps, giving people high fives, trying to make it up the steps to get to the guys. And as I was going down, there was a demonstrator on, I believe he was on my right side of me, so he reached over, I didn't know what he was doing, I didn't know if he was gonna hit me, and he put the MAGA hat on my head. So as I was still trying to walk down the steps, then he asked for the hat back, and I said, well, I would like to keep it because the hat's gonna help me.
Yeah, it's your passport through the crowd.
Yeah, exactly.
The lieutenant, the guy in charge of security that day, they said, oh, he was conspiring with MAGA to overthrow the government. It is flat out propaganda. This guy said he was never interviewed by the January 6th committee. Well, that's weird. How can the guy in charge of security for the certification of an election not get interviewed when security was breached during the certification of an election? That makes sense to you? Do you know who Tarek Johnson is? Do you not find that disturbing that they never called him and asked him, hey, how was the Capitol breached? Do you know the FBI, who claims to know that everything that happened they were aware of, and they had people inside and they knew it was coming, that they did not communicate that to the Capitol Police at all? Everyone in Congress should be furious to find out that the FBI knew something and did not tell them and allowed it to happen. Why? Because they endangered those people's lives. They did not tell security, hey, security, you need more people to secure it. Do you know why you need more people to secure it? Because we have inside information saying that this is going to happen. They are going to attempt to overthrow our government. You might want to let the guy in charge know, but they didn't. Not only did they not let him know, they didn't respond when everything was happening. He got no response. Not only did he get no response, they never even interviewed him after the fact. This is a production. This is propaganda. If there were a propaganda 101 course, this displays it all the elements you need. Lies, deception, omission, engagement. We know that the FBI had agents in the crowd and within some of these groups. Why? Because they told us. Okay, what was the role? Can't tell you. This is what they said.
How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants commit crimes of violence on January 6th?
I can't answer that, sir.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Our government ran not only a psyop to trick us into thinking something that wasn't there, but they were involved in the actual crimes that took place. And then they not only covered it up, but they omitted parts of the video and made it look worse than it was. And then when it's revealed by a guy like Tucker Carlson, they bash him, not the information that he put out. They didn't dispute anything he said. They just bashed him and said he's a liar. But all they kept saying is, he said it wasn't violent. That's not what he said. He admitted that there was violence. Everyone knows there was violence. We all saw the violence. What he said is the government did not show any of the peace that was happening there. And that is what the American people need to see. The full story, not what you pick and choose to show us so that you can demonize one side of the aisle for politics. So the fact is, you were lied to, I was lied to, we were all lied to, and now when we're saying, well, what's the truth? They're saying, you have the truth, you know the truth, stop asking questions. I just want to know what happened. How am I a threat to democracy by wanting to see video footage of a threat to democracy? That's what you called it.